Like the NCF, Intelligenesis is dedicated to shaping the future of cybersecurity. Together, we believe in empowering the next generation of cyber professionals with the skills and knowledge they need to thrive in this vital field. Together, we are committed to fostering innovation, resilience, and a passion for learning and aspiring cyber leaders.
Welcome, everyone, to our third annual Cocktails and Codebreakers event. We are pleased to once again co-sponsor this event with the Intelligence and National Security Foundation, who are great partners and supporters of the National Cryptologic Foundation. I'm Laura Nelson, the President and CEO of the National Cryptologic Foundation. I know a lot of you in the room, but for those I don't know, come and say hi later. We want to first thank all of our sponsors. Mantech, Intelligenesis, Sandbox AQ, IBM, COPT Defense Properties, SIM Software, GIBA, Tower Federal Credit Union, Clearance Jobs, theintelligencecommunity.com, and LG Tech. Please give a round of applause. And also our host committee, Tony Verstandig, Blue Wing Ventures, John Nichols, and Mark Gorenser. Thank you. Today, we are also pleased to welcome Dr. Vince Houghton, the current director of the National Cryptologic Museum, but also the author of Covert City, The Cold War and Making in Miami. There are books for purchase, and Vince is here to sign them for you. Since last year's event, we've seen quite a bit of change at the NCF as we continue our strategic planning process, and we're developing our developing partnership with the National Security Agency. As a reminder, our mission is to advance the nation's interest in cyber and cryptology, and our efforts include educating citizens to be cyber smart individuals, developing pathways for the future cyber and cryptologic workforce, engaging and convening partners to address emerging cyber and cryptologic issues, and continuing our traditional support of the museum and history. Our education mission continues to thrive under the leadership of Alicia Jordan, who is also here. And in the past year, we initiated the NCF Ambassador Program. You'll hear a little bit about that later in the program. We held a Cyber Saturday event at the Technology Advancement Center, translated our Outsmart Cyber Threats booklet into Spanish, and have updated our adult booklet to include AI themes. This fall, we initiated Season 3 of our Student-Oriented Cyber Chats podcast series with our new host, former Miss Marilyn Kennedy Taylor. We also kicked off a new podcast, Cyber Pulse, hosted by James Walsh, that is geared to adult listeners. Our Convening to Act initiative is well underway under the leadership of Kevin Keaton. And in the past year, we partnered with NSA and other stakeholders to assist with public awareness and engagement for post-quantum cryptography, otherwise known as QRC, by hosting 2 events focused on QRC firmware and software. And we're holding a follow-up event on March 11th of 2025 at the College Park Marriott. We are also pleased to partner with NSA for a Convening to Act on managing high-impact AI national security applications. That is a mouthful. And this will take place on March 27th and 28th at the Carasoft Event Center in Reston, Virginia. We are pleased to have our partner, Vin Nguyen, our NSA partner, Vin Nguyen, here in attendance with us this evening. We have several of our board members present today, including our new chairman of the board, George Barnes, Chris Roberti, Rand Griffin, Kevin Phillips, Calvin Nobles, and Guy Filippelli. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the hard work of our fabulous staff who pulled all of this together. Christine Harding, Rebecca Diamond, Kathy Herbert, Frank Wetzel, Alicia Jordan, and Cindy Sadi, who is our webmaster, while you worked through that when you did your registration. So thank you all. I mean, this is just, seeing this great crowd here, it just makes us happy. I am now pleased to introduce Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg, the CEO of INSA and INSF.
I'm Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg. I'm the president of the Intelligence and National Security Alliance and the Intelligence and National Security Foundation. The foundation is really pleased to be partnering for this event this evening. This is the third year we've had the opportunity to partner with the National Cryptologic Foundation, and we're delighted to be a part of the conversation this evening and supporting one of our premier partners in the community. So thanks for having me.
Pleased to have two senior officials from the White House and DoD as our guest speakers. Harry Coker Jr. was confirmed by the Senate on December 12, 2023, as the second National Cyber Director in the Office of the National Cyber Director at the White House. Director Coker is a retired Central Intelligence Agency senior executive and career naval officer, is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, go Navy, the Naval Postgraduate School, and Georgetown University Law Center. Director Coker also completed a joint duty assignment as the Executive Director of the National Security Agency, serving as the third in command of the largest component of the U.S. intelligence community. While at the CIA, he was assigned to leadership positions in the Directorate of Digital Innovation, the Directorate of Science and Technology, and the Director's area. General Timothy Haugh is the 4th Commander, U.S. Cyber Command, and 19th Director, National Security Agency, Chief Central Security Service. A native of Hughesville, Pennsylvania, General Haugh earned his commission in 1991 as a distinguished graduate of the ROTC program at Lehigh University. He has commanded the squadron, group, wing, numbered Air Force, and joint levels. He's served on staffs at Major Command, Agency, and Combatant Command Headquarters. His notable tours include Deputy Commander of Joint Task Force Areas, Commander of the Cyber National Mission Force, Commander of 16th Air Force, and Deputy Commander of U.S. Cyber Command. Our moderator for today is Steve Scully, the host and anchor of the Briefing with Steve Scully on Sirius XM, and former Senior Vice President at the Bipartisan Policy Center. He interviewed every president since Gerald Ford in his 3-decade career at C-SPAN. He has served in his 3-decade career at C-SPAN. He has served as political editor, host, senior executive producer of C-SPAN's programming, including the Washington Journal, Road to the White House series, and its podcast, The Weekly. In addition to his work at C-SPAN, he's chaired the Jefferson Educational Society Global Summit in his hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania, for the past 11 years. He served 9 years in the White House Correspondents Association, including as president from 2006 and 2007, and in 2019, he was named to the Pennsylvania Broadcasters Hall of Fame. All right, may we have our guest?
Thank you all. It's great to be here. Let me get the difficult question out of the way first, General, and then we'll get to the serious subjects, because how did the son of a loyal Marine end up in the Air Force?
My dad certainly instilled service as an idea. I learned the Marine Corps hymn really early, but that idea of service really connected with the United States Air Force. So it really, right from the outset, I was intrigued by technology. And he told me if I was intrigued by technology, maybe the Marine Corps was not the place for me.
Well, thank you for your service. And we have another Marine here. Who knew Montel Williams? What a distinguished career. I'm looking forward to this. I'm nervous to be next to you, by the way, so thank you so much. Director Coker, you say you like the hard problems.
Yes.
What are the hard problems that you're facing?
The commute from Baltimore to the White House every morning. I haven't cursed that much since I've been in the fleet. But with all seriousness, the expanse of cybersecurity challenges, the magnitude, and how it impacts every person in this country, and frankly, every person has a responsibility to do a certain level of cybersecurity, individually and collectively. You know, the national cybersecurity strategy has two big shifts, but the first one that pertains to this question is shifting or rebalancing the responsibility for defending cyberspace from those that are least capable to those that are most capable. Least capable, schools, individuals, hospitals. Those that are most capable, the federal government and big tech. And so making that shift without anyone thinking that they are absolved of their cybersecurity responsibilities is a challenge. So just the expanse and the threat is what is on top of mind all day.
And I know you have said repeatedly, General, that this is a public-private partnership, but as you look at some of the future cyber threats that we are facing, what are the questions that we should be asking, and what concerns you the most?
Well, Steve, when I think big picture and about public-private partnership, one of the big things from the national strategy really gets at the idea that cybersecurity is national security. And the core of our national security is our economy. So then we start to look at what has been the PRC activities and how they've targeted our industry. And for this group, you know well, the targeting of the intellectual property and the intellectual property theft being one of the largest transfers of wealth from one nation to another. And that, for us, in terms of our national security, is something that we have to ensure that we address. Because at our core of our national security is our economy.
So you came out with a 2.0 report looking at the Cyber Command, and there are some really specific things that you're looking for, very granular. Go through some of them.
So we haven't published the report yet. We have.
You're among friends. Do tell.
So here's what I will. I'll give you the where we are in the journey, because I think there are some things in there that, regardless of the solution, we're going to address. First, this is a partnership with Congress. Congress asks the Department of Defense to look at what will the future of Cyber Command look like. We're 10 years on. We've existed for about 10 years in various forms. And certainly the threat and what it has looked like has changed. And also the need for how we think about where cyberspace fits in combat operations has changed. And the threat to our networks has also changed. So they ask us to look at what are the force generation models we need. And they said, please consider the way you're doing it now, consider a cyber service, and anything in between. And what we've come out of that with is a couple core tenets. In whatever the Secretary chooses, because we're now at a point, we have to take this decision to the Secretary of Defense before the end of the year, it has to address mastery of our force. The services are doing a good job at now filling our force to a basic level of readiness, but it's all about expertise and mastery. And how do we get a force that continues to grow in mastery? How do we be able to enable them with the right capabilities? And how do we ensure that the entire department benefits from those investments? And those tenets are becoming stronger, that those look like the core part of the discussion, but we'll get to a decision by the end of the year with the Secretary. And then from that, we owe an implementation plan in accordance with the law by June. So we're on path, and we've gotten a lot of strong support from the department.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but this involves people, personnel, training, and I was speaking to a college president just a couple of days ago. They were talking about adding this as a curriculum, but what you're saying is that's great at the college level, but we need it at the middle school, at the high school level. What are you talking about?
Well, a couple of things, and I'm glad you spoke with the college president. I've been having some challenging conversations on that front when we've talked about many cyber positions do not require four-year degrees, but there is a written requirement in far too many. And we need to work with four-year colleges and universities on that to get to the right space. But nevertheless, we're talking about training for cybersecurity, which is more function-specific than education, which is more about broad knowledge. And a perfect example, General Haugh just talked about those masters of tradecraft, I guess right down the road from here, many of whom are enlisted, many of whom do not have four-year degrees. And I defy anyone to find a better cadre of cyber defenders than what we have here at Fort Meade. And so that's the primary example of how training folks to do the job is the best way to go, as opposed to doing what we've done for far too long, using college degrees as a proxy for knowledge. And we just can't do that anymore. So we need to work with colleges and universities, but we've been focused here the last few months on community colleges and technical colleges around the country. And just a couple of the best practices that we've noted been pleasantly surprised. A fair amount of community colleges have programs where they bring in high schoolers, juniors and seniors, and work on their cyber tradecraft while they're in high school. And by the time they make it out of community college, they are more than ready to go. And I know I'm in between. I guess I'm in the middle because of the Keystone State surrounded. But
There you go.
I
Yes.
was in your part of the world about a month ago, Western Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
And they have a program there at the Pennsylvania Cybersecurity Center where right now they're working with 8 counties and 10 high schools. By 2026, they're going up to 69 high schools to train those high schoolers how to be cyber tradecraft experts. And that's a best practice, but our great nation needs to figure out how to scale it, and that's part of the challenge. The other thing I want to mention, I know you're from Erie, Mercyhurst?
Mercyhurst Tom Ridge School.
Yeah, an excellent neurodivergent program. And while we were there a month ago, they announced a dual degree program for those very capable neurodivergent students where they're going to be trained and educated in cybersecurity. But again, another best practice that our nation has to figure out how to scale.
I'm going to ask you about Tom Ridge because he's a personal friend of mine, but let me go back to this report that you want to give us more details on. Feel free to. But we learned this week that North Korea is sending 3,000 troops to Russia. And we know that now North Korea and Russia have a much closer alliance between Moscow and Pyongyang. In your area, the adversaries that we're facing, whether it's Russia or China or other terrorist groups, how do we manage all of this?
So from our perspective at the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, it certainly starts with what are our national priorities. So we're going to align our resources to our national priorities. But in almost every one of the challenges you identified, we're going to approach it in the same way. It's our task to generate insights for the nation. How do we ensure that we're able to do indications and warning for our military commanders? How are we able to give insights to our policymakers so they can be thoughtful about how we respond to world events? And then how do we ensure that we've got resources against the things that will bring the greatest risk to our nation? Those are things that we manage every single day. And it doesn't matter if it's something that looks at our pacing challenge, which is China, that has to have the priority from our resources, or each one of these crises, we have professionals that are capable of managing that. And then the other part we have to be thinking about every day is how do we bring together the right capabilities for that force so that they can continue to keep pace with those demands, fully leveraging the technology that's available to us.
But you have to be right all the time.
And from our perspective, we also are part of an incredible intelligence community. So we have to be right, but we're also have teammates to our right and our left across the community that are bringing together other information. And how we pull that together and are able to work off of each other is also an incredible strength that we have that China, Russia, PRC, and Iran do not have. They don't start with trust. We have that both inside of our interagency, and then we've got partners and we've got allies that work with us in ways that start at a foundation of trust that is not available to those nations.
These are all the experts here. I'm just curious, though, when you were at Lehigh, did this even cross your mind? Was this even a subject area?
So being a geek, yes, I was thinking about these things. I went to the Soviet Union. I studied in the Soviet Union. I went to LSU, Leningrad State University, for a semester. And I was studying how the conscripts within the Soviet Union worked and what were the equipment that they were exporting from foreign material sales. So I was really started and rooted in it. Now you might question the fact that I became a Russian studies major and joined just as the wall came down. That maybe I wasn't destined for intelligence to see that one coming, but was certainly interested in these topics.
Where does AI come into all of this?
Like with many revolutionary technologies, there's opportunities and challenges. And one of the things that concerns me most is I see a lot of focus on the challenges, almost as though we want to run into the corner and get into a child's position and just hope AI passes us by. Well, it's not going to. So we need to take advantage of the opportunities as well. I'll be clear, and pardon my focus. Most people that know me know I'm a gloom and doom kind of guy. But I'm pleased, and we're in good shape. But
This is on the record.
I know. Public affairs is cringing in the back. Sorry, but it's a bit of an arms race in that AI is going to provide opportunities for those that would do us ill, and we have to be better than them. General Haugh talked about our values. We're on an unlevel playing field, not just in AI, but in national security and economic security and technological innovation, because we have values and we live by those values. We need to ensure that our values are properly addressed in AI. Does that mean that our adversaries are going to have some significant AI capabilities? Yes, they are, but they've been doing that for decades, and we're doing okay.
How do you, and I know you can't reveal your techniques and secrets, but just at the 30,000-foot level, how do you monitor what these adversaries are doing or potentially doing and the potential threat that they could have to the U.S.?
So I think from an NSA perspective, the first thing that we owe back to all of our policymakers is where are our adversaries in the use of these technologies? So when we think about our China strategy, one of the core tenets is how do we understand where the PRC is going from an economic and a technology perspective. That is something that we think about every single day. And we do leverage technology to do it. So from an NSA perspective, we've got decades of experience with artificial intelligence. Yeah. So we've been one of the leaders. We've been leaders in how we think about supercomputing and high-performance computing and how we leverage AI to do things like machine translation. We've been working with that technology for decades. Now, what we really look, and we're really proud of the role that NSA is playing to help inform how we think about it across the government, one of the things that we want to be able to bring back is the understanding of what threats our adversaries bring, and then through our AI Security Center, be able to inform what those risks are. What are the risks to everybody that's working in generative AI? How will somebody target a large language model? What are the security risks associated with it? And then what's the best practice from a safety implementation of an AI model? We want to do that informed by our understanding of those adversaries.
You know, Laura mentioned that I've interviewed a number of presidents over the years, and one of the most interesting interviews I did was with President George W. Bush 3 or 4 years after 9/11. This is a question for both of you, because what amazed him is pre-9/11, post-9/11, how antiquated the technology was in the White House, on Air Force One. And the second thing was the silos in the intelligence community. So again, in your areas, have those silos come down? Are they still there? Let me begin with you, Director.
Yeah. One of the remits that the Office of the National Cyber Director has is to bring coherence to the federal cybersecurity ecosystem, tear down the silos, essentially. And that's what we're focused on. I know there's been plenty of questions and talk about who's in charge. To me, as the National Cyber Director, it doesn't matter who's in charge as long as we're working together towards a common mission. And leaders can deal with that, and that's what we're doing.
But is that easier said than done?
Yes, it is easier said than done, absolutely.
Yeah.
When I cuss and fuss on the way to Washington, it's not just because of the traffic. It's about other things. So it's easier said than done, but it is an imperative. You know, the expanse, again, of the challenges that we have is significant. And we have to leverage every partner's key competencies to get after it. And that's one of the things I've been most pleased with since I've been in the position of National Cyber Director. The federal government recognizes that we will not succeed in cyberspace without significant partnerships across the federal ecosystem, state, local, tribal, territorials, which is a concern of mine, but also with our private sector. And that is new to me from when I was growing up in uniform with my classmate. In that back in the good old days, if you will, national security was the realm, essentially, of those in uniform and civil servants. But that's no longer the case in cyberspace. When you look at the 16 different sectors in our nation's critical infrastructure, the majority of which are owned and or operated by the private sector, you know that the private sector is a partner and has to be a trusted and key partner in defending cyberspace. That's just the way it is. It wouldn't be called critical infrastructure if it was not essential to the way we live, work, and play.
General, the silos, from your standpoint,
So
are they gone?
So I think we have done a phenomenal job of collaboration, and I think there's a lot of evidence to that. I think and so for everybody, if you get out your phone and you search for Hunt for Osama bin Laden or John Darby, you'll see the podcast that NSA did on the hunt for Osama bin Laden. And that's a story of where we fit in this broader set of activities to be able to work together, to be able to do what our nation needed. So I think those types of things that we do that every day. Now, there are places that we can't operate. And that's because of our laws and because of our values. One of our core values is unwavering integrity that is built on the foundation of the rule of law and the Constitution. So from a national security agency perspective, we don't operate in the United States. We only operate against foreign intelligence targets, and that is very clear. So that will, in many ways, that's ensuring we're going to do everything consistent with our laws, but that does, at different times, bring challenges. And that's part of who we are, and that's okay. We got to work harder to get that data to ensure that we're protecting every American's civil liberties and their privacy. But when we come together as a community, it's really powerful, and we do it routinely.
And if I could
Absolutely.
just add, I know I mentioned to you earlier back on federal coherence and working together. Just this morning, I got a call from another partner organization in the Executive Office of the President, and they need assistance with cybersecurity. They called the federal coherence guys and asked me to call NSA to provide some assistance. And I called my friend, my partner, Dave Luber, who runs the cybersecurity director, and said, hey, Dave, this organization has a problem. They know you have the skill set. They want me to make the connection. And Dave asked the right question, so we're making the connection. But that's just an example of partners being willing to make calls to others to make the connections to, again, move the mission forward.
What's your phone number?
Yeah.
Let me take this a step further, though. When you talk about partners, it's also our allies. So explain how it works with Australia, with Germany, with Great Britain, other countries that we are working with in collaboration and in tandem to make sure that those silos are also broken down country to country.
It's incredibly important. I think if you roll back to right before the invasion of Ukraine and the discussion that the president led on disclosing sensitive intelligence to bring together those allies. And it's really the most extreme example of how we leverage intelligence to be able to meet national security objectives, not only of the United States, but of our allies and of our coalitions, and to be able to build a coalition. That was built off intelligence. And that's representative of what happens every single day. There is not a single day that we're not sharing with every one of those nations in cyberspace. If we see a threat, we're going to notify every one of those nations. And then every day, we're going to have forums that we're collaborating together because we share the same challenges, whether it's the PRC in cyberspace, whether it's PRC economic coercion, or it's the threat that Russia poses to Europe. Many of those allies are feeling those exact same threats every single day.
But how do you spot the fake intelligence, the lies, the misinformation?
We have great people. And that's our job, right, is that we start with a set of training, and we start with training on bias. Every member of the intelligence community has a series of training that we do to ensure that we understand and recognize that bias is a part of all of us. And we have to ensure that we're using very disciplined methods, we're using disciplined tradecraft, and we're also growing analysts that understand the problem that they're evaluating. And that collaboration at times will extend not only within our building, but within our interagency and then with our partners. And we'll argue it out. If we see something and we have disagreement, we want those conversations to happen, and we encourage that at every level.
I saw something the other day, a payphone, which I have not seen in years. And I mention that because our lives are on our phones, our laptops, for those who have iPads. What do citizens of this country need to know about what's out there, the threats, and how they can be part of this operation?
I actually saw a payphone this weekend as well, but I was at home in Kansas, so they're all over the place.
Did you have a quarter?
I did, but again, what do our citizens need to realize? Back to that shifting the responsibility or rebalancing, it does not absolve anyone. And one of my big concerns is that every American know the threat that's there and know the risk that our nation is under, and it impacts all of us. Some folks don't want to recognize the threat posed by some of our adversaries. And my response is Maya Angelou. She has a quote that says, when someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. Well, our adversaries have showed us multiple times, and we need to recognize that we're in a competition that's going to last past my lifetime. Our challenge is to ensure that the competition does not become a crisis or a conflict. But every American needs to know that we are under constant assault, and it's not just the federal government. It's state, local, tribal, territorial governments. It's our critical infrastructure. It's the least capable of us when it comes to cybersecurity. We are all targets. We may not like to say that, but we need to understand it, realize it, and act on it. That's what I want Americans to know.
So to that point, General, we are very agile, we are very smart, we have the right people, but so are they. They're doing the same, and they may sometimes be a step or two ahead of us. How do we manage that?
So first, I want to touch on your last question, because I'd encourage everybody to go to nsa.gov, and you will see our guidelines of what NSA's opinion on how you secure your own cell phone, how you secure your home router, and the actions every American can take to just make their family more secure. And the way that we get after the next component of that, you will also see a whole series of cybersecurity advisories where we're communicating at an unclassified level how China's operating, how Russia's operating, how Iran's operating. And we're doing that at an unclassified level so we can get to collective defense. That's our strength. The strength we have as a nation not only is what we can do in the intelligence community, our strength is our industry. And how our industry is brought in as a partner when we think about this, not just as a cross to transom, but how do we collaborate together? Because this threat is targeting our industry. And how we work together is an opportunity that I think can bring an enormous advantage against any one of those actors if we're working in concert for collective defense.
So how is the private sector preparing, training, planning, tabletop exercise for those threats?
Oh, private sector recognizes again that they are our partners. And related, when I was growing up in the civil service, I had a perspective when it comes to talent that I now believe was wrong. When it comes to, back then, information assurance, CompuSec, whatever, cybersecurity today. Given, again, the fact that those 16 critical infrastructure sectors are primarily owned and operated by the private sector, the federal government cannot be in competition when it comes to cybersecurity talent. We need to complement each other. Mm-hmm. We need to work it together. Whatever we steal from one side, the other side's lacking, and we become more vulnerable. So it's a partnership. Talent, and as we've talked about here recently, it needs to be a better partnership in operations, not just information sharing, but in operations. That's a challenge that my friend said will make lawyers uncomfortable, but that needs to happen.
You know what Shakespeare said?
Please.
Kill the lawyers first. Sorry about that.
Yeah. But private sector, when it comes to cybersecurity, their training is similar to ours. And why? Because they are under assault by the same adversaries and cyber criminals that we are. Those adversaries don't distinguish in a practical point federal government versus critical infrastructure owner and operators. So they're getting the same attacks that we are.
So I have one final question to give both of you the chance to give some final comments, but you mentioned the word talent. When you were at the U.S. Naval Academy, did you realize how talented Montel Williams was?
I did. I first noticed Montel during plebe summer, that first summer, during a boxing smoker. And Montel beat some poor kid shamefully. And so I always kept my eye on him and actually said I wanted to be a boxer like him. So I knew how talented he was from that first ring of the bell.
We'll give him equal time in a couple of minutes. But let me end on a serious note, and thank you all for being here. We don't know what we don't know. And you are on the front row seat of really navigating a lot of complexities. So what keeps you up at night? What worries you the most? What are the biggest challenges? And how do we get there? Director, I'll begin with you.
Yeah. I'm so old and tired when I get home, nothing keeps me awake. It doesn't. And, but the challenges that concern me the most, now I alluded to our state, local, tribal, and territorial entities that have a role in defending our nation in cyberspace, that have a role in protecting our...
Are they doing enough?
They're doing their best. They are doing their best with what they have, and that's where I'm headed, with what they have. They need more, and it's not just about money. I heard a senator on the radio driving in one morning saying...
From Baltimore to D.C.?
Yeah. He said that he's never heard a proposed solution to a problem that didn't start with, give me more money, I need more resources. Fair enough, we need to be as efficient as we can, but I'll tell you, when it comes to cybersecurity and those state, local, tribal, and territorial entities, they do not have enough resources, and that is very concerning to me.
General.
So I think from my perspective, I do sleep well. And the reason that I sleep well, we have two 24/7 ops centers that have professionals that every day come to work and they can drive our enterprise from both an NSA perspective and from a cyber command standpoint. And so those teams are so well prepared and they execute any authority that I have just superbly on any crisis. The things that I'm focused on right now, I think are, one is the shared challenge that we're all going to have, which are the designs that the PRC has on the rules-based order. That is an issue for every American. It's an issue for each company, and it's how we approach that as a nation is our generational challenge, and it's the generation coming behind us. And so with the conditions we set and how we engage with China, our task is to inform that and to ensure that we're giving the best intelligence to our policymakers and to our military command. The other area that we're currently focused on is election defense and election security. And we are incredibly proud of being a teammate to DHS and FBI and the work that they do every day to support state, local, and tribal as they execute a safe and secure election. And they are prepared and they are ready. And it's our job to be able to communicate if any threats emerge, but we could not be more proud of the work that goes on across our federal government to be good teammates with the states as they execute this.
So with 11 days to go before the election, November 5th, and I'm calling it election week because we may not know on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, my guess is by Thursday, but how confident are you that we will go through this process seamlessly?
So we have, if you go today to the DNI's website, we have been updating every week the threats that we see. And we're putting them out at an unclassified level. They're going out by various spokespeople. And we're talking in very plain language as to what we see and what we expect. There is going to be enormous amounts of disinformation that are going to come from our adversaries. And we are going to continue to be able to identify that and be able to support the FBI as they continue to do both operations against them as well as the indictments from the DOJ. And in each one of those indictments are spelling out exactly what our adversaries are doing. So I think we are well postured to be able to identify each of those threats and be able to communicate exactly what's happening. And it really is going to be up to every American to be able to then take that information and understand what's occurring in our information space. because we're focused on those foreign actors and how they influence.
Thank you both for your service. Thank you both for what you're doing, and to all of you for what you're doing. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you all for a really wonderful talk. And thank you for being here today. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Alicia Jordan, the NCF Director of Education, who will be recognizing several educators who have tackled cybersecurity with their students in the classroom.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Alicia Jordan, the Director of Education at the National Cryptologic Foundation. With over 20 years of experience as an educator, I am deeply honored to be here tonight at NCF's annual Cocktails and Codebreakers event. It is a privilege to stand before such a remarkable group of individuals who share a passion for advancing cybersecurity education and inspiring future generations. Before we proceed, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to some of our key supporters of our educational initiatives. A special thank you to the Gula Tech Foundation, the Chilton Foundation, the FCA Maryland chapter, Booz Allen, and Northrop Grumman. Your continued commitment and generosity have allowed the National Cryptologic Foundation education team to grow and impact thousands of students, teachers, and communities. We are truly grateful for your support. This evening, I'm especially honored to present 2 prestigious awards to individuals who have demonstrated exceptional innovation and leadership in cybersecurity education through our Ambassador Program. These educators have gone above and beyond to inspire and empower their students, helping them develop the skills and knowledge necessary to thrive in the digital age. These 2 teachers' unwavering dedication to fostering a passion for cybersecurity among their students exemplifies the core mission of the National Cryptologic Foundation. And we are incredibly proud to recognize their efforts this evening. Our first award recipient, a teacher from St. Mary of the Mills, Mr. Derek Harrell. The second teacher we would like to acknowledge from Robert Frost Middle School, Mr. Daniel Rose. Thank you all for being here tonight, and please join me one last time in congratulating these outstanding teachers.
All right, I'd like to now bring Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg back to the stage.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks to the National Cryptologic Foundation. What I really want to just real quick pull the thread on, because I know we all want to hear from Montel, is what Harry said about neurodiversity. This is an area that the INSF Foundation has really been very forward-leaning on. We have something called our NatSec Neurodiversity Network that you can join on LinkedIn, and we also have a $15,000 scholarship for an undergraduate college student for a neurodiverse student. So if you do not know what neurodiversity means, talk to me after this event. It's a cadre of individuals, a lot of them college-bound, maybe not college-bound, that are underemployed and can really thrive in this community. So that's my pitch for the INSF Foundation and some of the things that we're working on. But now I would like to thank Laura, Christine, Rebecca, the National Cryptologic Foundation's board for allowing the foundation to be a part of this evening, as well as many of you all know Montel Williams. You know him from his Emmy award-winning television career, but what you may not know is that he has served 22 years in the Navy and Marine Corps, and starting his journey as a Navy cryptologist. In addition to his impressive military service, Montel is about to add military historian to his resume. His accomplishments include the release of this book, The Sailing of the Intrepid, a narrative history of the USS Intrepid's remarkable wartime voyage. He's a passionate advocate for veterans and their families, and we're thrilled to have him here tonight. I am going to turn the stage over to him. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about you.
I feel like I'm in the midst of a legend.
Oh, my goodness.
So they said, you're going to interview Montel Williams, and I said, really? I had no idea. You have had an impressive 2+ decade as a Marine in the Navy, in intelligence, and on top of that, you have written now 9 books?
This will be my 9th book, yes.
So I'm going to talk about The Intrepid in just a moment, but let's talk about your television talk show.
Sure, sure.
How did that all come about?
Crazy. And it's a tough one. It's very interesting. I met a lady back there who just stood up and said, yes, she showed me a picture from one of the plaques that I received while at the National Security Agency when I became the youngest OIC of an organization then that was called Classic Paladin. Is that still even there? Is Paladin still there?
No.
No? Paladin's long gone. Well, let's see if I can, how do I explain this? It's really weird. Those 3 degrees of separation were 9 degrees. Mr. Coker and I share a classmate of ours from the Naval Academy. We were both class of 1980. Classmate of ours, his name was Wick Paul, who back in 1988 was working in a recruiting command in the Midwest. And Wick is a very good friend of both of ours. And Wick used to be this guy who's kind of like a procrastinator, okay? He was procrastinating a little bit. So he was scheduled to put on an event that's called a MORE team visit, minority officer recruiting effort at then Kansas State University, was part of the Big 8 Black Student Union Council. And he waited until like the last minute to see if he could call some other minority officers to see if they'd come out and help him out. He called me at the last minute and I said, listen, I could do this, but I'm not gonna recruit anybody. I'll come out and I'll talk about leadership. And part of the reason why I wanted to do that was because at Classic Paladin, and for those of you who don't know what Classic Paladin was, at the time was the home at the National Security Agency for all of our Hebrew, Farsi, and Arabic linguists. At the time, this is before all of our incursions in the Middle East, we only had about 19 linguists in all branches of service, all housed in Classic Paladin. I don't think I'm violating security by this, but...
You're among friends.
Okay, I'm among friends. So, I mean, these guys were flying out of Rota, out of Athens, and, I was their OIC. And we were having a lot of problems with retention at the time because these were the only guys in the entire service, in all branches of service, that were deployed for 189 days in a row. They would come home for 2 days because we had so few, and we redeployed them 2 days later. So they go back in the theater. Because of that, I started a program where I tried to bring all of the family members onto the post at Fort Meade and talk to my OIC, or the captain who was in charge of naval security activity at the time. And I said, what we need to do is start supporting those families more because it's the family issues that are bringing these guys home. These guys want to get out immediately. They're gone too long. We're sending them away. And so when I talked to Wick, I said, look, I'll come and talk about leadership and some things like that. He said, okay, come on out. So I went out, and Mr. Coker went out there with us, and we did a couple presentations in front of large audiences. One of them I did garnered about 1,200 speaking requests.
Wow.
So I immediately...
They knew you could talk.
They knew I could talk. So I immediately came back to Naval Security Group activity, Fort Meade, and said, look, I'm doing this thing on the side. If you don't mind, on my leave time, I can do this. And the CO said, okay, as long as you do it on your leave time, you can do this. So I said, great. So about a week and a half later, I took some leave because I had never taken leave. And so I had maybe 60 days saved up on the books. So I started taking some leave. I went out to Colorado, spoke at an event there. I spoke to 9 different high schools as a guest of the governor of the state. Flew back home, and I transferred then from Fort Meade to then I became the NA2 for Sublant. So I was at Sublant, and back then my Admiral Kelso was, before he became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was Single Land Fleet. The day after I spoke, the newspapers in Denver wrote, Navy sends spy to recruit kids to go in the military. This was in like 7 newspapers.
Wow.
And I get called in on the carpet. I didn't do this. And he said, well, you can continue to do this stuff, but make sure, downplay this spy thing. 3 weeks later, I do another speaking event. I think I did it in Baltimore, in D.C., and Governor of Baltimore flew me in to speak in Baltimore, and I spoke here in the D.C. area. Next day again, newspapers, Navy sends spy. It was the craziest thing in the world.
Wow.
And that literally, you know, my boss called me in on the carpet. The next time he said, look, you got to make a decision here. Either you're going to continue doing what you're doing, or you go help kids the way you want to help kids. What do you want to do? And I picked helping kids, sorry. So I went ahead and resigned my commission. I started a program called Reach the American Dream, speaking in schools around the country. I spoke to almost 3 million high school students, colleges, civics arenas all over the country, talking about then negative youth trends, which was dropping out, drugging out, and sexing out. That became a media event all to itself. Every place I went, cameras were showing up because I was doing it in uniform. I got special authorization to do those speeches in uniform because I wasn't recruiting. And got contacted by some people with Gannett. I ended up doing a program with Gannett out of Florida that won the Best of Gannett Award for the year. Then I had local stations around the country asking me to come in when I do programs for them. And as I started doing that more and more, next thing you know, I win an Emmy as a talk show host. And I wasn't even a member of Natus. So I flew to LA. I flew to LA on Christmas Eve, 1990, met with a couple of producers who said, you know, have you ever thought about maybe doing a talk show for kids? And I said, I don't know a talk show for kids, but I'll do a talk show. They said, really? Yeah. So we started talking about that Christmas Eve, 1990. By the middle of January 1991, I was in meetings with every syndicator in the country.
Wow.
March 1991, I signed my contract. May 1991, I went on the air and never looked back.
Phil Donahue just passed
I know.
away.
Very close to me.
Really,
He's a friend of mine.
he really set the standard, didn't he?
A lot of people don't even know that Phil Donahue created what is modern day talk. Most people think that that was done by Oprah Winfrey and some others. Not true. Phil Donahue was the first host to step across the light rail and put a microphone in an audience member's face and say, what did you say? Because the audience member was hackling. And the next day he had the highest ratings of any show in daytime because he allowed the audience to talk back, and that became the genre.
So I'm going to ask you this question with an answer to my
Sure.
own question. One of my most memorable interviews, surprising interviews, was sitting down in 2000 with President Gerald Ford in Philadelphia. During the middle of the interview, he literally had a stroke. He had a TMI. He snapped out of it. He went to the hospital. Hopefully he won't get a stroke today. But my question is, what's been the most memorable, unusual, interesting interview you've ever done?
Well, first off, I should explain. That's a very personal question, and why?
Yes.
Because a lot of you don't know this because I kept it from the press. But 6 years ago, I had a major hemorrhagic stroke that almost took my life. 50% of the people who have that type of stroke die. I was very blessed and fortunate that I survived and I'm able to recover from that. But I got to tell you something very strange. When I look back at my television career, just the Montel Williams show alone, I did over 3,200 interviews. And back then, if you remember shows of my type, we had a minimum of 8 guests on the show. So I spoke to close to 30,000 people, 3,100 people sitting on the stage beside me. And my approach to the show is a little bit different than most people's, and most of the shows at the time. It's the reason why I think my show stayed on as long as it did, is because I literally tried to get inside the guest and tried to bring that guest inside your living room. And I tried to do it in a way that respected your living room so I could be invited in the next day. So I had a myriad of guests on my show, and I look back at it now trying to figure out who was my, I've been asked that a million times, who was my favorite guest? But I can't tell you. I mean, I did shows that changed America. And you say, what are you talking about? It was just a talk show. Well, I did more shows about kidnappings in parking lots than anybody else on TV. My show was the reason why the entire car industry in the world put a trunk release inside of cars. On my show, I had guests who had been kidnapped and children who were being abused. who figured out that, when we were changing from digital or from analog to digital phones, you could tap the receiver, the little thing that hangs up your phone. If you tap that, it would count out 911. You didn't need to have a phone. So kids who were being kidnapped, they ripped the phones out of the wall. They could still walk up and tap that and get the police. We did shows that, long before these clowns did things about who's the baby daddy, I did DNA to find fathers or mothers who could give kidneys to their children. So my approach was a little different. If I look back at it now, though, and I think about it, I did a show that was, the title of the show was My Brother's Keeper, and it was about a young man from Baltimore who literally was 15 years old, 16 years old, but happened to be like a 16-year-old like Mike Tyson. This kid was, I know a lot of you don't know Mike Tyson's history. Mike Tyson weighed 215 pounds at age 16. He was beating up grown men. He was a bag man in New York before he went to Customato, who basically they gave him the Customato out of the court system to let him train to be a boxer. I had a young man who was in Baltimore who literally his mother was a crackhead, taken off, left he and his younger brother at home by himself. And this kid literally went out on the streets of Baltimore beating up drug dealers, stealing their money so that he could pay the bills to keep his brother in school. What we ended up doing was finding his mother on the streets, reuniting them, and bringing that family back together. That's what ended up winning us an Emmy for the Montel Williams show. So that was probably, when I look back at it and think of something that was a really, really powerful show that we did, that was one of them.
We need you back on the air.
Oh.
We
Well,
need you back on the air.
I am on the air now.
I'm going to talk about that in just
Sure,
a moment.
okay.
But I have to go, you cannot go through your own health challenge
Yes.
without affecting you, thinking about the fragility of life, thinking about all that you've gone through. What did Montel Williams think?
When the stroke happened? Oh my God. And I tell you, this is really crazy. I'm still, I can't get this mentality out of me because it's Marine Corps training, it's service training. We're all told that the more space we take up, the bigger we are, the bigger man we are. Yeah, right, whatever. Up until 7 years ago, at the Naval Academy, I did box. I won the brigade boxing championship at the Naval Academy. But about 3 weeks later, when I was one of the people selected to go to the national team, out running, hit a curb, hit the ground, ripped my knee apart, had to have my knee operated on 3 times. That crushed my boxing career because I couldn't really sustain a lot of long-distance running. So I became a power lifter and joined the Naval Academy powerlifting team. So I was one of those guys who used to think that if I could put 500, 600 pounds on my back, I'm more man. So, and that lasted me through my life. What I didn't realize is as we start to hit those milestones of age, there are certain things we men need to stop doing. One of them, and I don't care who you think you are, I don't care how big you think you are, but I'm telling you the day is going to roll up on you around 55 to 60 where you got to stop lifting this stupid heavy weight. Did that register with me? No. So I literally was in a gym in Manhattan. This is stupid. I almost feel ignorant saying it. I was in there doing about a 350 bench squat, and I was doing squats and power jumps with the squat thing. And I was in the gym by myself, and I did the squat, and I put the weight down, and all of a sudden I heard this pop. I looked around in the room, and there was nobody there. And the next thing you know, the room started, kaleidoscoping. And I said to myself, and I won't use the language, but I said, you just had a stroke. No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. And then I started realizing because I knew what some of the symptoms were of a stroke, I was getting ready to sit down, but I didn't sit down because I knew if I sat down, I would want to lay down. And had I laid down in a gym, I wouldn't be here today. So I ended up wall walking myself from the gym all the way back up to my hotel room where my wife was at. And I said, call 911 right now and tell them your husband just had a stroke. And blessedly, I happened to be in Manhattan at the time. Manhattan is the only city in America that has specially configured stroke emergency vehicles, that they move around the city every night and park in different places so they can be around the city. They move around.
Yeah.
And just so happened that night, it was 5 blocks from my hotel.
God was on your shoulder.
On my shoulder. So the emergency vehicle showed up. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, happens to be a very good friend of mine. He was in Europe at the time. It took them 5 minutes to get me down to the vehicle. 3 minutes later, Oz was on the phone with me from Europe, talking to me and telling me to put the phone in the hand of the doctor. And the doctor and Oz figured it out, and I was having a stroke at the time. I didn't wake up for 6 days. My wife stayed in the room and slept in the bed beside me for 6 days. They thought they were going to lose me. Woke up 6 days later and completely lost almost all my faculties and worked really, really, really hard to get it back. And what did I think? When I realized that I was not going to go away, I realized that I had so much more that I had to do. And it was so far beyond the show of what I had to do. There's so many things that I have worked with personally in medicine and in life that if I were to go away at that time and never shared them with anybody else, how criminal would that have been of me? And so that set me on a mission to make sure that all the things that I learn medically, that I try my best to share with whoever I can share them with. And I do that now today, not only through the different shows that I do, but I'm still working, on a almost daily basis on programs that can help our warfighters and help those that are out protecting our democracy stay as healthy as they can.
I'm reminded after Reagan was assassination attempt, and he spoke to reporters, and he said that whatever time I have left, it's for him up there. And I think having gone through what you went through, thank you for that.
Sure.
You have been passionate about mental health issues when it comes to those in the military.
Absolutely.
And thankfully, we are talking about it more openly than we have ever before, but we have a long way to go.
We have a long way to go. Unfortunately, there's that other thing, We in this country seem to think if somebody says they have a little bit of a problem, all of a sudden they are less than. That's a bunch of BS. There's not a person sitting in this room that I think at one point in time in their life did not have some sort of a problem psychologically that they may have hid from their friends, hid from their loved ones, hid from themselves. But those problems exist. Sometimes we look at this generation that's here before us right now and they say, well, they're soft. No, they're not. They're human. And the second we start to recognize that all those that are going to be providing cybersecurity and all the technical help that we have, these are human beings who from time to time we need to check in and make sure that they are doing okay, because they're the ones that aren't doing okay who may be one of our bigger threats. They don't even know that they're a threat. But they're home sad and angry, and they're angry, well, I'll just get back. We need to start taking care of those who take care of us. And, I was mentioning it to the general, and I also mentioned it to Mr. Coker. I've been working on, let me tell you something, this is really crazy. I've been working on a project now for 14 years. This project hasn't changed in 14 years. This project is called the RTM Protocol, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories Protocol. This protocol has been approved by every individual approval body in the world. The ISTSS, which is the governing body for psychological protocols in trauma. It's been approved. It's been studied at King's College. It's been studied at Walter Reed 3 times. 9 out of every 10 people who go through this protocol walk away remitting 100% of their symptoms of PTSD in as little as 5 hours with no medication. You would think that our VA, you would think that our DOD would embrace this with open arms. But no. Why? I'm not going to say it's nefarious, but I'm going to say that there are those out there who have turned the pain of others into a cottage industry. We spend close to $150,000 a year on some of our troops that are suffering from PTSD. where for less than $12,000, I can make it go away in 2 days. It's been proven. We just finished the last double-blind study at Walter Reed, and the doctor in charge of the study at Walter Reed just said that this should be the #1 protocol that all of our troops are introduced to immediately when they complain about PTSD. And guess what? I got the Secretary of the Navy assisting us right now, who's trying his best to push this forward as fast as we can.
But why?
But I'm being...
Is it bureaucracy?
When you have budgets of $3 billion, when you have pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars off of the pain of those who defend us, I say it's sick. That's what I say. However,
You're among friends.
calm down, Montel. I was spoken to, I worked on a medical device that was wallowing at the University of Wisconsin for 20 years. I helped to capture the IP, take that, turn it into a public company, raise over $100 million for that company in less than 10 years. Not a penny went to me. Not a penny. And I didn't even try to get a penny. In less than 7 years, we got full FDA approval. That device is right now being utilized in Canada, Australia, the United States for MS, Parkinson's, stroke, and other illnesses. But in that time that it took me to get it there, I had one of the smartest neurologists in this country look me in the face and say, Montel, anything that is transformative in medicine in America is met with the most vehement and adamant resistance. Because we do not have a healthcare system in this country. I don't care who tells you we do. They are lying to your face. We have a sick care system that is based on how much money people can make off of people being sick. So the second we change that paradigm, more and more of us will get better.
So you have some great projects. This Lifetime series really seems to be a labor of love for you. Talk about that.
It's funny. This came while I was laying on a gurney in in New York Presbyterian Hospital after my stroke. I had a company reach out to me because they said, there's a show that we're doing, and its host, unfortunately, do you guys remember Arnie Early, the gunny that played in a lot of movies?
Yeah.
Right? He was about to pass away. He was the original host of Military Makeover. And he was passing away of congenital heart failure. And they asked him, Army, who would you like to be the replacement of the next host for you? And he said, me. They reached out to me. Sorry.
It's okay. You're among friends.
While I was on that gurney, and that literally gave me the hope that I wasn't thrown away. So
Did you feel like you were thrown away?
Oh, I knew that if I couldn't walk, America was done with me. So, I worked as hard as I could to get myself back together so that I could host the show. And what Military Makeover is, it's a show that's on every Friday morning on Lifetime. You have to check your local listings, but it's mostly 7:30, 8:30. The show is about, what we do is we find deserving veterans who have been nominated by people in their community, and we go to the veteran's home, and in 10 days, we do a complete makeover of that home from the ground up, from the yards to the ceilings to the HVAC to the rooms to extending. Unfortunately, if a veteran seeks aid from a lot of the charities that are out there, it's comical how some of these charities are, well, if you lost one leg, I'm not going to widen your door. But if you lost 2 legs, I'll widen your door. What? Wow. If you lost an arm and a leg, well, I might change your counters, but it's stupid. We change that house over to make it a livable. We like to say we take their house and turn it into a forever home. But that's what we do for veterans. And we shoot that over the course of a 10-day period of time. We cut it into 6 different shows, and it airs on Lifetime.
You're an amazing human being. Do you know that?
No.
You are. And he, except for the goatee, he kind of looks like Phil Donahue. So we're going to get some questions from those of you who have a question. Just stand up, and we'll run over with a microphone. While we get somebody in place, let's talk about your book, The Intrepid, which is going to be a terrific movie if they make it.
I pray that they do. The Intrepid, you know, a lot of you know the Intrepid Museum. It sits in the Hudson up off of Manhattan. It's been there, and you look at that ship when you go there. It is a museum. It's a beautiful ship, and you never really thought about what its history was. But the Intrepid was really our incredible, unsinkable Molly Brown, in a way. The Intrepid was commissioned, and 3 months later, in service in the North Pacific, it got struck by a Japanese torpedo that damaged its rudder to the point that the rudder was jammed 40 degrees to port, or starboard, forcing the ship to go in a circle no matter what they did. They could try their best to use the screws, the engines, to try to balance it out, to get it to go back, to get it to Pearl Harbor to see if they could at least start fixing it. They couldn't do it. And they were going to scuttle the biggest warship ever built at the time. And the very ingenious captain on board the boat, who's a Naval Academy grad, Captain Sprague, said, you know, I wonder if we put a sail on the front of this thing, maybe the wind could move it and force it to go straight. And everybody was like, are you crazy?
I mean, this is like a...
We're talking an aircraft carrier,
Yeah.
one of the biggest aircraft carriers of its time. And guess what? They put a sail on the front of that aircraft carrier and were able to traverse, I think, close to 1,100 miles back to Hawaii, fix the rudder, take it up to Washington State, refit it, got completely redone, sent back into service. A month later, gets hit by a kamikaze. Back to Washington State, refit, gets hit by another kamikaze. All we cover is you got to think about the resilience and the ingenuity of sailors and soldiers at that time, thinking themselves, I can take this floating building and put a sail on it, and maybe I'll make that work. So it's taking modern technology, going back to the old. It's an incredible story. We just published the upcoming pub date, which will be in May.
May of next year.
Yes, and I'm glad you asked me about it, because I know this book is going to be a bestseller. The author that I'm working with, the co-author, David Fisher, has written 110 books. 85 of them have been New York Times bestsellers, so I'm looking forward to this being one. And I'm hoping that after this book, my next book, rather than try to be a Tom Clancy, I really want to write a book, and I've been talking about this for now 6 years, about what you guys do. And I know when you look at some of the books like The Puzzle Pals and other books that were out in the past, these are people who really kind of gave up secrets that they didn't need to give up. I have no intention of doing that. I want to just applaud the work that you guys do. This country doesn't know that you're responsible for the way this world is today. It's because of cybersecurity. It's because of what you do that we are as safe as we are. And I think this community needs to be applauded. And this needs to be one of the movies that are written. I don't need a James Bond book. Mm-hmm. We need a real, live James Bond, the people who live here and work here. And so I'm hoping that that's what we do as my next book.
Can I go back 40 years?
Sure.
Grenada?
Yeah.
What were you doing? What did you know? What was the intelligence like? And how did all of that unfold?
That was another crazy time. I should back up. When I first got to the NSA.
You were in the Marine at that time, right?
No, I was in the Navy.
Okay.
So when I first got to NSA at the time, my first operational deployment as a direct support cryptologist was on board the USS Sampson, on board a mission that was then called Jittery Prop, which was in the Gulf of Fonseca between Nicaragua and El Salvador. We were providing intelligence, providing information back then. And I was on a debt there. Now, I should tell you, I had just left DLI for Russian, get to NSA, and of course they sent me on to a ship with a Spanish crew. Okay, so I had the Spanish Cryptologic debt on board the Sampson, and if you look back in time, there was a major explosion there in something called the Gulf of Fonseca, or I'm sorry, Jalisco Bay, right next to us that they tried to blame on the Sampson 2 weeks before Grenada went down. Mm-hmm. We were literally rushed from the Pacific through the Panama Canal, full speed ahead, to get there to provide linguistic support to the first joint operation landing on Grenada. Unfortunately, what had happened was they planned this entire mission but took no linguists. They just had the linguists that were soldiers that were operating as part of the invasion force. And so they put together a quick skiff and they put together a quick little debt, and they were trying to figure out how many Cubans were still on the island. But they were using guys that were not people like you. So they had guys that every time they heard Spanish, they were hitting this DF button. So by the time our ship got there, they literally sent a helicopter out, grabbed me by helicopter along with two of my linguists, pulled us off the boat, took us on to Grenadiers, took us up to the skiff, said, "Can you tell us how many real Cubans are here?" And the first thing my linguist did was, "Who are you listening?" They're listening to fishing boats off the coast of South America. So these guys had been DFing. Every time they were DFing, they were identifying a brand new Cuban. It was 300 fishing boats.
Oh,
boats.
my.
So we kind of, in one day, that went from 300 to 15.
Questions from the audience? I
Crazy.
can't top that. Yes, right over here, please. We have a microphone. Come on up. Go ahead, Phil. Walk over the mic. Wait, we didn't hear the question. Sorry.
Well, I'm no longer fluent I'm barely fluent in English. But I studied Chinese at the Naval Academy, and that's how I got the job in cryptology. I should back up and say, when we graduated, class of 1980, and I don't know if you remember this or not, our class is the last class of people in the entire military to receive immunizations by a gun. And the reason why is because the gun was set 5 times too high for the first 100 people who went through. I was number 5. As a 5th guy who went through, I got an overdose of diphtheria, typhoid, and some other, I think it was rubella or something they put in at the time. Put me in the hospital at Bethesda, Walter Reed. And unbeknownst to the military at the time, and the shot didn't cause my MS, but what happened was the shot sent my immune system into such disarray that I went through my first episode of MS and nobody identified what it was. So upon graduation, I walked across the stage, graduated with my class, received my diploma, but I'm one of the only peacetime graduates to receive a diploma and not get commissioned on the same day. I got put on a medical hold. I was put in medical hold for almost 6 months where I was not going to be commissioned. And I'm going to tell you the honest truth, I got really pissed off because it was like, I didn't do this to me. And I demanded my commission. So I ended up going to Congress and the Senate. Then Congresswoman Mikulski and Senator Sarbanes, who went down and fought for me. 6 months later, I got my commission, and they literally offered me 2 jobs, Supply Corps or Cryptology. I said, Cryptology. And
The rest is history.
The rest is history. And then immediately went to DLI for Russian.
Sorry.
But can you speak Russian?
Я говорю по-русски не хорошо, не плохо. Yeah, I can still a little bit. I've forgotten so many words, it's crazy. Not too many places I'm at where I get to speak Russian. I'll tell you, when I tried to...
And you don't want to go to Russia now, for sure.
No, I can't go. Well, I just found out after doing this book that I'm still under security constraints today because of what I did while doing this job. And so I can't go to Russia, nor would I want to anyway.
Right.
I think I'd probably get locked up. I got to be on a list over there somewhere.
Another question from anybody? What was he like? Oh, yeah, go ahead, please. We'll get you the microphone. Yep, he's coming.
When it comes to security of elections this November 5th, has there ever been the idea of allowing voters to vote online with Homeland Security?
What, voters to vote online with Homeland Security to
Yeah.
allow for the PTSD program?
Everyone right now, I'm actually an inspector of elections where I live in California, so I'm well familiar with the election process firsthand.
Yeah.
It's either you vote in person or you vote absentee ballot. Besides that, when is the future of elections going to come here in the near future? I hear in other countries I've studied, they do biometrics, they check in with their eyeballs. I've heard even now other states are using IDs, especially in Europe. And even now they don't like it where some citizens travel. They don't
Yeah.
like mobile voting in Europe. But
So-
in the USA, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
when do people go to DHS to vote for a presidential election?
Yeah, on the issue of voting on laptops or cell phones or whatever. And I've actually asked that question to a couple of secretaries of state, and including in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, saying it won't happen in the short term just because of the concerns that they have. So let me turn back to you.
Sure.
Did somebody in your life, a friend, a family member, an officer, shape who you are, affect who you are, influence your career? And if so, who is that person?
I was a strange kid. I will admit it and say it. When I was, I'm a kid of the 50s. I was born in the 50s, and I was born in a little area north here, Cherry Hill, which was at the time in the 50s one of America's largest ghettos. Matter of fact, it was the site of the first Superfund cleanup site. A lot of people don't know that. Why? Because Bethlehem Steel was there, dumping as much junk as it could into the dump that was 2 blocks from my house. As a child, I remember, running through the outskirts of the trash to chase rats out so some of the bigger kids in my neighborhood could just shoot them with BB guns. My parents worked very hard to get us out of that. I ended up going to a little area called Morse Hill, northern Anne Arundel County. I grew up there. And I had a father who worked 5 jobs. One of them was in the fire department. So as I grew up, I always had this paramilitary presence in my home. And I respected the military quite a bit. And I tried my best to do as much as I could. I was a student. I was my class president 2 years in a row. I was a student on the Board of Education, the first student on the Board of Education in any county in this country, in Anne Arundel County. I was a, student politician, Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils, Maryland Association of Student Councils, and I literally didn't think my career was going to go through the military immediately or to begin with, but my parents had already spent all their money on my 3 older siblings, sending them to college, and the only way I was going to get there was if I got the GI Bill. So I decided, because there was one young man who was a year ahead of me in high school, who was a very close friend of mine, who ended up enlisting in the Marine Corps and literally got shot in Cuba.
Oh, no.
And came home on leave. And I'll never forget seeing him when he came home on leave in that uniform, and the respect he got from all of our peers was over the top. So I literally wanted to be a little bit like him. I want to be like Mike. His name was Mike at the time. And I went ahead and enlisted. And I was fortunate because when I enlisted, I went to Parris Island for boot camp. I went in a delayed entry program. Got to Parris Island. I got meritoriously promoted out of boot camp, so I was an honor man out of there. Went to my first duty station, which was 29 Palms. I was supposed to be in communications electronics, but they made me a troop handler instead because there was too many troops coming in and they needed some work in administration there. I got meritoriously promoted again in a month and a half to Lance Corporal, and then I had a gunny who was working for me, who had been actually at the Naval Security Group activity at Fort Meade, who said to me, you shouldn't be here. I think you should probably be an officer. You ever heard about that? And I was like, well, I don't know. So there's this place called the Naval Academy. I said, dude, I grew up 15 minutes away from there. I used to roll those guys in them white uniforms on the weekends. And he said, no, well, you ought to go there. And I said, really? Okay. So I went to the prep school, entered the prep school in 75 with 40 other Marines. 19 of us graduated from the prep school. 12 of us got appointments to the academy. Only 4 of us graduated with our class.
Wow.
And I was one of those 4.
We've had a reality show, talk show as president. We've had an actor as president. Have you ever thought about running for office?
I'm not going to get killed. No,
Literally or by the media?
No. The media can take all the shots they want. I could care less. My problem is, and I've probably been asked this question, believe it or not, 20 times.
I'm sure.
5 years ago, I was asked this question, why don't you? And my honest answer is, unfortunately, I'm sorry, folks, please, I don't say this trying to be disrespectful to anybody, but I don't give a damn what anybody thinks about me. I don't. I'm going to do what I'm going to do to help as many people as I can. And I'm going to do it in a way that I'm not beholden to anybody. We live in a time right now where, unfortunately, listen to the astronomical numbers being raised for this presidential election. $1 billion by one, $1 billion by another, and it's got to get spent between now and 2 weeks? What? And you tell me that not one of those people that are taking this money are going to feel beholden to somebody? Listen, I'm not casting aspersions on anybody. I'm not picking a side for anybody because I'm tired of the sides. The only side we have is a side called We the People. That's what created this. And unfortunately, I know how much money it's going to cost to do and run for office. And somebody's going to kill me for giving me that money and not kissing their butt afterwards. So I'd rather do what I'm doing, try my best to impact as many lives as I can before the time that I'm gone. And remember, I was in a conversation with a gentleman today at the airport, believe it or not, coming this way.
I bet you're still recognized all the time.
Oh, yeah. And you know, a gentleman walked up to me and he said to me, you know, I'm talking to young men and trying to get them and make them understand their responsibility as men and as fathers. And, you know, he was angered by the fact that a couple weeks ago when, you know, a certain, you know, leader tried to speak to some people at a barbershop, this whole group of people got offended as if you can't have anybody question what you do. And my answer to him was like, it's for all of you, same thing. Stop for a second. Right this second, I want you to think in your mind 20 people that have influenced you. Try to write that list in your mind real quick. Can you write it? I know you can't. And if you tell me you can, I think you're lying. Because, we might say Abraham Lincoln, we might say George Washington, we might, but by the time you get to the 11th, you start, Well, think about that. There's been probably 400 million people who've lived in America, and not any one of us can remember more than 11 of them. So when I'm gone, no matter what I do, no matter how many people I help, no matter how many things I change, 2 years later, less than 11 people are going to remember who I am. And I'm not trying to say that to say I'm inconsequential, but what I'm trying to tell you is that if we're living for accolades, skip it. It doesn't matter. How many of us go out and visit a graveyard right now and look at the names that are on tombstones? You don't. You don't give a damn about who came before you. So start giving a damn about you and what you can do to impact the lives of those around us. And the more and more we do that, the better we're going to be.
Stay well, stay healthy. The petition to get Montel Williams back on the air is out in the foyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, I just want to thank you for all your service in the military, in support of our government, in support of the We the People piece, but really in support of understanding what it means to be genuine and do what matters, not what people force you to think what is important. And so thank you for all that.
Thank you, sir.
You sent a signal to all of us tonight, so thank you. Just a small token.
Oh, whoa.
This is cool because it's a medallion for the National Cryptologic Foundation, but it's got an Enigma machine on the back, which is
Yeah.
like a cool deal.
Yes. My goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Yay. Thank you.
All right, so I just want to thank everybody for coming, for being part of this. The whole purpose of the National Cryptologic Foundation and INSA is to bring all of us together. We have a common cause. It's to cherish and uphold what our nation stands for through all of our different ways and means. So what you're doing, whatever you are doing, is important, and bringing that together here is important to all of us. I think we heard what Tim and Harry deal with day in and day out, notwithstanding the traffic, notwithstanding Tim's commute versus Harry's. a little different. One's about a quarter mile. They serve selflessly under lots of pressure. I know it, I've been around them, and I know what they go through, and I want to thank you all for what you do. Thank you. I want to thank Suzanne and INSF for supporting the NCF together tonight to make this possible. So thank you. And of course, all the hosts, all of you sponsors, we couldn't do it without you. The people we really need to think about, who are perhaps the most important here, are Derek and Dan. Derek and Dan, where are you guys? Okay. Derek and Dan are investing in the future of our country. They are making a difference to children, giving children the opportunity to see something bigger, to be something bigger, to choose a path. So influencing our children is the most important thing any of us can do, because they're the ones that are going to get us out of some of the troubles we're into right now. So thank you to Derek and Dan and all that you represent by investing in our children. So thank you. And with that, have some drinks, have the rest of the food, and please come again next year. Thank you very much.